Hi, and welcome to RBP on JSB. I'm violinist Rachel Barton Pine, and today we're going to be discussing the fourth and final movement of Bach's Sonata No. 1 in G minor, the Presto. By the way, if you want to hear a general discussion of some of the issues that pertain to all of the movements of the Sonatas and Partitas, please be sure to watch the overview episode. So this movement is entitled Presto, but that doesn't mean to play it AFAP, as fast as possible. Of course, it should go along at a pretty good clip, but not so fast that the notes get obscured in a very echoey kind of room. Of course, it all depends on what your venue is. If it's very reverberant, you don't want the notes to turn into a big mush. But even if you're in a drier space, you want to make sure that you're at a speed that still allows for a lot of phrasing, a lot of character, a lot of detail, and that's much more important than running through it. In other words, the designation presto is more of a feel than a specific mark on the metronome. It's not a tempo as much as just a general concept of a feeling of speed and action and liveliness, etc. So, interestingly, Bach wrote all of these measures in two measure groups. He has a full measure line and then kind of a little miniature measure line every other measure. And so he wants you to think of, I think, the big idea in lots of two-bar groupings. One thing you have to always ask yourself going through as you're working out your interpretative scheme of dynamics and structure and so on is when you're going to be on the string and when you're going to be off the string. You don't want to do the whole piece always one or always the other, because that would just be boring and wouldn't always fit the music. So you might start on the string. Well, I wouldn't really diminuendo there probably, but like here. Might be more off. Then I might be a little more on. Of course, some people do stay off the whole time, but using different types of, little short notes or long, slightly separated notes. It depends on what kind of bow you're using and what its action is. But in any case, you want to vary the bow strokes as you go along and always be thinking about which one works better over here and which one works better over there, and making it give it some good variety. Slurs have a lot of meaning, and so you always want to make sure you bring them out. There's even some really fun ones, like the spot at measure 111, where you have three-note slurs in a row, kind of giving it, well, it's not a hemiola, but it's taking 1 and 2 and 3 and turning it into 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I guess it's the opposite of a hemiola, taking a big 3 and making it into little 3s. Or you could say it's taking 3 and making it into 2. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and something like that. Anyhow, you'll see what I mean if I start in 110. So if I don't bring those out, it could just sound not as interesting. If I'm kind of thinking 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and, but if I think da 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 da, then it's more fun. And then 25, the same thing. You could da 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 da. Or you could keep it in 3. You could argue either way, but I don't know. Sometimes it's just fun to do things a little different and then go back. Of course, you wouldn't want to take that too far. You could do... Those almost seem like they're 3-note triplets, but the piece is in 3/8, so most of the time it should be... Right? So it should be clear that it's in 3/8. Okay, but you can just have fun looking for some of those things and using slurs. Here's a fun spot in measure 101. With these little 2 slurs separate, a 5-note slur, then a 6-note slur. The bowing pattern is a little weird, but if you do it as it comes, as it's written in the manuscript, then it actually works itself out. You want to make sure you don't accidentally slur all of 102, because that's not what Bach wrote, and then you have to do, you could make it homogenized by putting a slur on the last 2 notes of 101. But then it's just more ordinary. that's more complicated and therefore more interesting. So when in doubt, do the more interesting version. And I don't think Bach made two mistakes in a row, and that 101 and 102 should have really been what 103 and 104 are. Doesn't seem likely to me somehow. Now, I mentioned the concept of hemiola. So what that is essentially is something that's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 becomes 1, 2, 3. So in other words, or sometimes people think of it as 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So it's making little groups of 2 to make one big group of 3. So what we're doing is measure 30 and 31, for example. Instead of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. It's 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Or 1, 2, 3, 1. I'll show you how that sounds. Another one might be measure 33. So here I'm not phrasing from the slur. It's another idea of what these are doing because we have your bass notes. And so bringing out those bass notes makes it into an interesting hemiola. Then, of course, your cadential hemiolas at measures 52 and 134 at the end of each half. And I mean, I wouldn't do it that exaggeratedly. I'm just showing you. And so actually another thing about the typical Baroque hemiola is that it's not 1, 2, 3 in the big 3 equally. It's more like 1, 2, 3. So therefore the 2 is not even as emphasized as the final 3, which would be the last 2 of the second bar of the old little 3s, if you know what I mean. 1, 2, 3. Instead of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Which you would think, well, that's the top of the phrase, right? But if you look at the second one, there's your top, so that argument doesn't quite hold water. And cadential hemiolas are such a typical thing that, again, if you can do one, you probably should do one because it lends some interest. Here's another cadential one to a cadence that occurs in the middle of the movement. Measure 80. And in fact, I didn't even mention, but of course, measure 30 is also a cadential hemiola. The one that happens right after it in 33 is not. But we have 2 cadences in the middle. No, actually, I take it back. 3 cadences. One in the first half. A point of resolution. And then in the second half, into measure 80. A resolution there, and then a kind of a quasi one at 110. I'll lead up to it. So that one, kind of on the fence about. It's not quite a cadence. It's just a little moment of slight resolution. But those other 2 are very obvious big cadences, and you definitely, again, fighting against the inclination for this to sound like a boring perpetual motion. The one at 32 and the other one at 82, you want to make sure you take a really good deal of time so that you can have a point of relaxation in the middle of each half. So what's miraculous about this movement is that, unlike the density of the 3-voice fugue or the 3-voice Sicilian or the very, all the big chords in the first movement, this thing is mostly no chords or double stops at all, only a few of them, literally. But yet Bach nonetheless manages to imply multiple voices happening simultaneously. There's still a whole ensemble here. So the first time we really get a clear bass voice is entering at 12. So, in other words, don't play it linearly like the notes are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Give this note to this guy and these other notes to this other guy, even though he didn't beam it that way. You could even... That might be more accurate. And again, with our 2-bar phrases, and then another 2 bars, then more 2-bar phrases, starting with a sequence So those were kind of going down, dum, bum, 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 bum. A lot of times you can tell the direction of music by are the notes going down in pitch or are the notes coming up in pitch. So we just went down in pitch, and now we're going to come back up. Every 2 bars we get another pitch. And now every bar, right? So the action is going by 2 bars and then by 1 bar. Let's see how that works. Then it doubles in time. Then your cadence. And then going on. So sometime, not a terrible ton of time, but there are your bass notes. So just kind of bring them out with the emphasis, not really so much a timing thing, because taking lots of time on them is going to distort your 16ths in an overdone way. And they're going down the scale. And now by 1 bar, as opposed to those 2 bar phrases. Crawling all the way down. Now we have a pedal point starting at 47. And that's our first half. So a lot of the same things happening again in the second half. Measure 72. Going down, then coming back. So always think, is the music moving by 2 bar bits, or is it moving by 1 bar bits? So here it's moving by 2 bars, then 1 bar, 1 bar, 1 bar, 1 bar, 1 bar, and then your cadence and then going on. Now this is interesting. Bach is so clever that just when you think you've got him figured out, he throws you another amazing idea. So here in 89, he actually puts the bass notes in the treble. So those are the bass notes, but he's flipped it upside down, and then still with the bass on. Then going back down the scale, and with your 2 bar phrases. And then here's our funky spot. And then now we're back to the bass notes in the bass. 1 bars down the scale, a little point of relaxation, then the action picks back up. And then, so now we have our bass notes. 2 bar phrases. And then now the bass is in the treble again. Of course, these guys are still important, but they're not the actual bass notes, even though they're in the bass voice. Now the bass gets to finish in the bass. And there we are. So those are some of my thoughts about the G minor Presto. I'm Rachel Barton Pine, and thank you for watching RBP on JSB.